I equals we, and that is how we, whether it's, people whose ancestors were enslaved in this country, the U.S., or people whose ancestors were enslaved in various different islands, or, whose countries were invaded and brutalized in all kinds of ways by European colonizers. I equals we is the thing that helped us survive and make it to today. And so when we forget that, that's when we start to die spiritually. That's when we start to disappear. But if we hold on to the I equals we and just look at what did our ancestors do to get us to today, we will be okay.
Welcome to the Zami Nobla National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging podcast. We are your sound source for Black lesbian herstory. I'm your host, Angela Denise Davis. In December of 2019, I sat down and had a conversation with Dr. Lourdes Dolores Follins. She is a Black queer femme psychotherapist. She's also a Yoruba priest, a writer, and someone who's committed to the thriving of the souls of Black folk. She's phenomenal, y'all, so you're going to enjoy this conversation. I'll be back on the other side of it.
My name is Dr. Lourdes Dolores Follins, and I show up in the world as a child of Ogun and Oya, my mother's daughter, and a working class striver who's always thinking about what work needs to be done.
Well, we are so glad to have you here for the Zami Nobla podcast. We've been trying to make this happen when you were here in August for the LGBT Black Health Forum that Zami Nobla sponsored. Mm-hmm. And you were here showcasing a very important book that was published a couple of years ago, but some people may not know that much about this very important resource. So why don't we start talking a little bit about your book on Black LGBT health?
Okay. So the book was published in 2017 by Lexington Press, and it's called Black LGBT Health in the United States, the Intersection of Race, Gender, and Sexual Orientation. And the book really came out of an editor from that press emailing me and saying, hey, we saw this book chapter that you did on the experiences of young Black and Latino gay men when it comes to racism. And homonegativity. Do you have anything else like that? Like, do you have a book or, something you're working on that could be a book? And I said, no, thanks for reaching out to me. Bye. And the woman wrote back, well, let me know if there's something you're working on. And I thought, okay, well, thanks. Bye. And I was a college professor at the time at a community college in New York. And I thought that was it because I, asked and answered. And then something said to me, there's got to be something you can do. You can't let this pass. Like, you can't just let this go by. It's an amazing opportunity. I was like, it's the end of the semester. I'm fitting to go into the summer and relax. So just let this go. But then, of course, the voice in my head said, no, you have an opportunity here. Someone reached out to you about work. And you can use this opportunity to impact people's lives in a positive way. And so I thought, well, let me see if there are any books about Black LGBT health. And something said to me, don't waste your time. There's got to be something already written. And so I went to the Google and proceeded to look, already certain that there was something there. And much to my dismay and horror, there was nothing about Black LGBT health in the United States in a comprehensive way. Everything I found one book about Black LGBT psychology written by a Black lesbian colleague of mine, Michelle Lewis, out at Winston-Salem. And I thought, okay, well, that's about psychology, but it's not about our overall health. And then the few book chapters I found were in these anthologies or edited volumes that are mostly written by and for white researchers. White, either heterosexual researchers or LGBT researchers, with one little book chapter about Black people that were LGBT or Q. And so I thought, oh no, this is not okay. Oh, we got to do something. And so Ego said, well, girl, just go ahead and write a book. And then I said to Ego, no, you need to involve people in this journey. And I thought, well, and Ego said, well, it'll be faster if you just do it on your own. And then I said to Ego, yeah, it'll be faster, but it won't be as rich and as deep if you involve other people. So I reached out to all the Black LGBTQ researchers and scholars that I knew and trusted and respected. And I said, hey, so I'm thinking about pulling together this book, about Black LGBT health in the US, but from a strengths-based perspective, not looking at everything that's wrong, but looking at what we do and how we're surviving and thriving in the midst of adversity. And so most people were like, oh, that sounds great, but I'm busy. And I said, okay. And Jonathan Matthias Lassiter, a wonderful person, a wonderful psychologist, who's a Black same gender loving man, said, oh my gosh, Lourdes, I'd love to work with you. And I said, okay, we'd known each other for about 5-6 years. And so it was a great opportunity for us to work together. And we decided from the very beginning, since it was my idea, I'd be the lead editor, and he'd be my co-editor. And so we divvied up the work. And I wrote the introduction, he wrote the conclusion, and then we sent out the call for proposals. And we ended up getting a lot of really rich, deep, life-affirming information about what people are doing and as far as actual interventions and community building activities, but also research. That can help create community interventions or just strengthen communities. And so we ended up with about, maybe 12 different chapters, written by Black, same gender loving, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans people. And there's a chapter about LGBTQ youth that are Black in the legal system. Then we also have stuff around, the typical stuff around HIV and same gender loving men, but not about, not about trauma or risk or what have you, but looking at how people are staying safe, whether they have the virus or not. And then also looking at lesbians and breast cancer. And we tried really hard. And we were actually really, really committed to having a chapter on Black seniors, Black LGBTQ seniors. But unfortunately, the one person who submitted something that was really promising, she had to think about tenure. Oh. So she had to yank her proposal. And so that is something that's missing. But there's also a chapter in there about the experiences of Black trans men seeking healthcare. So and these are just a few of the topics in the book. And so it's designed to be for both people from the community as well as for researchers and people who are service providers, because the purpose is to tell us about us, and then tell those who don't know us but who are tasked with serving us how to serve us in ways that are affirming, culturally humble, and culturally responsive. So that's the book. It came out in hardcover first, and now it's out in paperback. And I think there's also an audiobook.
Well, that whole idea of for us, by us is so important because that, in my estimation, changes the shape of the end product.
Absolutely.
Because so much of what we see, particularly and not just in health, but other areas where folks are writing about Black folks, you don't see that real care about, we're going to talk about our strengths and what makes us thrive. More often we see, this is what's wrong with these folks.
Right.
And I'm not for sure that's very helpful for people thinking about how can we thrive.
No, not at all.
In this world of oppression and all these complexities.
No, actually, you make a really good point. It's not helpful. If anything, I don't want to say, it's not that it's depressing per se, and I'm putting that in air quotes, because as a psychotherapist who's a mental health professional, I think a lot about language and how stigmatizing language can be. But when we hear about, or when people continue to harp on what's not working, it does not create any space for, well, wait a minute. what are we doing right? What are we doing? What's going well for us? And how can we continue to do that? And how can we share that with each other across communities, across regions, across countries? And so that was really at the forefront of this from the very beginning. And whenever people would send proposals that were pathology based, we're like, no, sorry. You can either revise and resubmit this from a strengths-based perspective, or you will not be included in the book. And there were some people who couldn't make that shift, which was both really strange, but also kind of scary. Because here we are in the 2000s, and there are people who technically should know better, who just couldn't wrap their minds around Black LGBTQ people and our strengths.
Wow.
And our resilience and how we're not fragile.
And these were queer researchers and
mostly
academics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who were,
yeah. Largely they were. I mean, we had one white woman who was queer who, offered something. And I said, okay, well, this is interesting, but you need to include a Black person. Because we were also really clear about the criteria. It's not just that you had to have a strength-based perspective and a resilience perspective, but you also had to either, if it was one person, you had to be Black and from the community, or if you were not Black and from the community, you had to have a Black researcher or a service provider or a community person as a co-author. Because we were clear, this is a FUBU project for us, by us. And we were shameless about that. We didn't blink when people said, "Oh, you should know." That's what we're doing. And so, in a twisted way, in a weird way, we were being radical. Which I'm still like, wait, this is 2000 something. This is what's considered radical.
Yeah,
being unapologetically Black and queer is radical. Wow, wow.
And knowing no one's going to come for you but you.
Exactly.
And it's fascinating that you would talk about these academicians, these researchers who couldn't make that leap from the pathology to the strength-based, because we often make the assumption that because you know something, because you've had an opportunity to study, then obviously you should have the capacity to do something like that. But in the end, you're like so many other people who aren't able to really center themselves.
Right.
From that place of strength.
Right.
And it's fascinating because I'm talking sometimes to sisters and particularly with folks who use the language, and language is important, lifestyle.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I'm in the lifestyle or my lifestyle. And to me, it really speaks of just, I want to ask the person, so how do you center yourself? If you have a lifestyle and everybody else, has a life.
Right. What's going on? What are you doing? What you got?
And so I think that whole idea for us, by us and centering ourselves and making this work accessible to not just folks in the academy, but to the sister on the street who talks about having a lifestyle, and the brother and everybody else who's interested in LGBT health. But I want to go back. I'm not in the academy, but I don't assume every day somebody calls you up and says, "Hey, do you have a book proposal that we could possibly?" I don't know. I don't know if the academic universe works that way. I'm assuming it doesn't.
Right.
So that was very special in your understanding that you had to bring other people into the mix. To me, is very rich. Because oftentimes things land at our doorstep and we don't seize the opportunity to take it.
Gotcha.
Sometimes out of fear. So was any of that a part of that process when you got that call, or did you just have to work through massage thinking about what you would do?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm smiling. I wish the audience could see me because I'm smiling / smirking. It didn't take it was really overnight. I'm pretty quick when it comes to opportunity and when it comes to work. And I mean work as in the work, and when it comes to work, because my mantra is always better. That's my life's mantra, always better. So the name of my company is Meliora Consulting because Meliora is Latin for always better. And so everything I do is designed to be better for us all the time. And so it's, okay, I did this thing and it's helping, perhaps this group of people. Okay, what's next? What can I do next? So when I initially got the email, let's say it was a Monday. I don't know exactly, but let's say it was a Monday. By Tuesday morning, I woke up and I was like, no, girl, you can't let this go. This is an opportunity.
Okay.
You just have to seize the opportunity because you may not get it again. And for me, that's definitely informed by my working class background because you don't know if something good's going to come again. There's always an expectation. Well, I may not get this again. Got to seize it now. And again, I could have taken what I would say is the easy/lazy way out by saying, I'll just do it on my own. But I said, no, it'll be deeper and richer and much more meaningful for everyone if there are multiple voices in this book.
That reminds me of Bernice Johnson Reagan talking about in the civil rights era of the 50s and 60s when Black folks sang "This Little Light of Mine, I'm going to let it shine." It was very understood that I was we.
Yes.
And I think working from that vantage point is very powerful. And what we try to do even at Zami Nobla with the Baker's House is involve as many people in the mix so they can see that the work that we do is really us. And I want to say that's a very real African aesthetic of us understanding about community as opposed to the way in which so many of us have a very Western stance of, I have to do it.
Right.
I have to work towards my health. Right. I have to do this job. I have to create this family. But community is very important, isn't it?
Vital.
How do we begin to, as we talk about Black queer people and health and wellness, and specifically Black lesbians, how do we begin to help people think about, particularly in these days where it seems like at every turn there's another conflict, another source of trauma. How do we help people think about really building community and shaping communities of wellness where we can work from our place of strength and enrich opportunities for thriving?
That is a very thick and deep question, Angela.
We can massage it. We're just going to massage. We'll massage on the edges first.
So I'm going to take it like a piece of tiramisu, work a layer at a time.
Yes, perfect.
In my work as a psychotherapist, what I do, on one hand, it seems like a very individualistic prospect, right? It's just me and one person. Although I do work with couples and triples or threesomes. And most of my clients are Black, cis people who were assigned female at birth. So Black women, whether heterosexual or lesbian or bi or queer. And I always tell them, you can't do the work unless you do your work. And so for many of them, their work does involve, the relationship that I'm building with them as their therapist. But whenever I sit with someone for the first time who's coming for therapy, or even couples or triples that are coming to me for therapy, I always ask about support networks. Because to me, no one, at the risk of being cliche, we're not islands. We're not islands. We're not meant to be islands. It is not for or in our best interest to be islands. And so I always ask, okay, well, who supports you? Besides me, potentially, who else supports you?
Right.
And that could be in concrete ways, in spiritual ways, in financial ways, in emotional ways, in all the ways. Who supports you? And so whenever people start talking about, well, I'm suffering, I'm alone, or what have you, and I said, well, wait a minute, I thought you told me about your friend Shanae. What happened with Shanae? Didn't she just call you the other day and say X, Y, and Z? Why are you not seeing her as a support? Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Or, okay, are you in touch with your family of origin? Yes. Okay. Well, what kind of support are you getting there? Or what kind of support are you giving and getting there? And what does that look like? And how does that feel? Or, wait, I thought you mentioned you were part of a running club or you were interested in joining Black Girls Run. Okay, well, what's happening with that? Like, I'm always making sure that if they don't talk about who's in their community and their support network, that they're constantly either building it or deepening it because they can't survive. We can't survive alone. And I don't think we're meant to survive alone. That's not to say I don't think we have the need to sometimes have time alone to be introspective. But by and large, we're meant to be connected, regardless of whatever worldview you have. I do really think that we're meant to be connected. And that connectedness, just because, humans are social animals. We thrive on connection. Even introverts like myself. There's some level of, connection that we must have that feeds us. And so when we think about the world that we're living in, the times that we're living in, it's even more vital to be connected. It's even more vital because, like Brother Frederick Douglass said, divide and conquer. And I think a lot I reflect on that phrase a lot. I think a lot about how, whether it's capitalism through neoliberalism or white supremacy or any of the phobias or isms that we experience as individuals, as communities, they're designed to keep us apart. That's the whole point. We're not supposed to be collective. We're not supposed to thrive as a we. And so, as a 21-year-old young man who I interviewed for a research study once said to me, things are working the way they're supposed to. And I looked at him and I thought, what do you mean? And he said, well, this disconnectedness, this internecine fighting that we're experiencing sometimes in our Black queer communities, that's what's supposed to happen. And I sat down and I was like, okay, brother man. All right, young brother, say that. Say that. And so I strategically remind not just people that I work with as a therapist, but also people in my writing community, my loved ones, Black queer people that I meet. Even if it's just a conversation in passing, I make an effort, whether it's gently or firmly or playfully or in a serious way, of just reminding them that I equals we. I equals we, and that is how we, whether it's people whose ancestors were enslaved in this country, the U.S., or people whose ancestors were enslaved in various different islands, or whose countries were invaded and brutalized in all kinds of ways by European colonizers. I equals we is the thing that helped us survive and make it to today. And so when we forget that, that's when we start to die spiritually. That's when we start to disappear. But if we hold on to the I equals we and just look at what did our ancestors do to get us to today, we will be okay. I hope I answered your question.
I hear that. No, I hear that. And, as they say, the struggle is real. I think the struggle in terms of showing up as whole as possible with our piece of I, so that we can be healthy. We can be difficult because you can be in a space and you see people, and you may be a person yourself who's leaking. Because you have so much woundedness, so much trauma, so many things you've not resolved. Right. That kind of shapes that community, or that opportunity for folks to engage with you. And I'm just thinking about just the weight of what we carry at so many different intersections. Not just Black, not just a lesbian, not just a woman, not just a person with a disability. And you can just put other layers in the midst of those intersections. Right. And it can become kind of heavy.
It's not kind of heavy. It's completely heavy. It's overwhelming.
Heavy. Overwhelming.
Weighs us down.
Yes.
Or can weigh us down.
It can weigh us down. So how do we then begin to, in the midst of all of that, really develop tools for resilience?
See, ever since I was a little person, little girl, words have had multiple meanings for me. I've always been fascinated by what words mean and all the different meanings words have. So the ideas of tools for resilience, I think we innately have them. We just forgot, or sometimes we forget because we're so busy trying to make it. We're so busy trying to put food on our tables. We're so busy trying to get clothing to put on our back. We're so busy trying to get money to just survive on a very, very basic level. And then sometimes even once we have, all the material things, then we're trying to take care of our soul or the souls of our loved ones. So I think we innately have the tools. I think as a result of slavery, many of us have forgotten what they are. And so for me personally, what has been vital, and I'm sorry, I keep using that word over and over again, but I do think a lot about life, what gives me life, as the children say. What keeps me, keeps my head above water is one of the things that has helped me personally is looking at my ancestry. And so having the chance, the opportunity, the time, and I'm clear about that, right? The time, because that's a luxury. To look up that information, to ask my mother, to ask my grandparents, to ask my stepdad, where do we come from? And where'd they come from? And where'd they come from? And to be able to trace my ancestry back to the 1834 and 1850 in this country. And then to literally chart that out so that every day I go downstairs to my altar, my ancestor altar, I see my family tree and I pray and I say, Grandma so-and-so, give me strength today. I know you migrated up north multiple times, one time pregnant with my mother. Give me strength today in 2019 to be as steadfast as you were. So that's one thing, for those of us who have the luxury or access to that information. I think also remembering that despite the fact that we were not meant to survive, whether it's religion, spirituality, love, nature, movement, having conversations, having open conversations with ourselves and each other, taking time when you can to just sit and be still and say, what do I need right now? And thinking about the ways, like looking to our families of origin, if we know, and for those of us who were foster children or those of us who were adopted, looking at, the people who raised us and looking to see how did they get through? How did they get through their hell? How did they get through their struggles? How did they get through their traumas, whether it's a big T trauma like war, domestic terrorism, or maybe a little T trauma like, they watched a car accident. How did they get through these different things? And sometimes we may say, well, they just prayed on it, or they just read a book, or they went for a walk, or they went for, I don't know. They went dancing. These things, these tools, they may seem so simple and so silly, but they remind us that we're alive. They remind us that we get the gift of waking up every day. And the people who birthed us and nurtured us, whether they meant to or not, modeled some of those tools. So we come with a toolbox, but many of us forget, oh yeah, I got a toolbox right here on my hip. Oh, that's right. Great Aunt Tilly did such and such. Auntie so-and-so did such and such. Grandpa, that's right. He would go for a walk, half an hour every day. Or, my auntie, she would make some pig's feet. And even though, yes, it was a meal, she would also sing while she did it. Or, my mom or my dad or the person that raised me, they would make bread. And even though that might have been the only thing we ate, there was some laughter while she was making the bread. Or she would tell me a story while she would make the bread. And so all these seemingly little things that seem inconsequential, are tools for resilience. And so I struggle with the idea of tools for resilience because I think that humans, generally speaking, and no lie, Black people, are innately resilient. We keep bouncing back. Humans are meant to bounce back. If you look at a child as they're running and they're playing, they fall. They don't know to get scared unless unless the adult shows them to be scared.
Right.
But they naturally think, oh, I just fell. Okay, I'll get up and I'll run again. We're meant to bounce back. And so when it comes to tools, I think we have the tools, but we tend to forget the little things that have helped us and our people or peoples survive and thrive all this time.
Well, and that's something that I find to be very important because that idea of remembering, because it makes us understand what's possible in a world where we're told some things are impossible. And I get a little concerned when I think about some younger folks who are not that aware of history. It's like, for instance, someone sing a song and say, oh, so-and-so, that they did a great song. And you're like, well, that was Al Green from the 70s. That was not original. That was a cover.
It's a remake.
That was a remake. But if you don't know that, you think, oh, this is brand new.
Right.
And so many of us don't know that about ancestors and not just our family, but cultural ancestry. And being able to say, hey, Nanny Hannah Burroughs, who had that idea. We specialize in the wholly impossible in the 1900s around in education in the DC area and all. Very, very powerful. But if you don't know that, you lose a sense of what's possible.
Right.
And so I think this whole idea of making people aware of ancestry and who you are, who your people are, where you come from is very important. Who are your people?
My people? My people are from South Carolina. My people are from Louisiana. My people are from Virginia. My people are from Cuba. My people are from Nigeria. My people are from Togo, Congo. My people are from the universe.
Where your mom and your daddy from? Maybe I should ask you that.
She didn't ask real specifically, so I gave her all the things.
Let's just localize it.
My mother.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Staten Island, New York.
Okay.
Which is a book in and of itself. So it's the smallest borough of New York City, but historically the wealthiest borough of New York City, but not for the working class people. My mother was born in Queens. She was conceived in South Carolina, and she was only born in Queens because my grandmother migrated with my mother while she was pregnant. And my dad, his people are from East Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Prince William County, Virginia. So I'm a granddaughter of the South.
There is a book in all of that.
Yep.
And I hear that you're writing a book about all of that.
You're so smooth.
I try my best.
Yes. So in addition to being a psychotherapist, I'm also a writer, and I write both, academic stuff about Black LGBT health and spirituality, and mental health, but I also write creative nonfiction. I'm working on a memoir of about my relationship with my mother, who died in 2014. My mother was a character, like most mothers are. But unlike most mothers, she was someone who was conceived in the South, but very Northern, and ended up in foster care. And that impacted her life, her perspective around child rearing, and our relationship. And so that's a book I'm working on. It's almost done. And, the piece about ancestry that I mentioned before, that's going to be in another book, a fictionalized book coming down the road.
Did the process of writing your memoir or the process, since you're still working on parts of it, has that brought to surface some grand revelations for you about your life and the way in which you've chosen to move in this world?
Yes and no. I've always been really, really clear about who I am and why I show up the way I do. Honestly, it wasn't writing the book, but getting initiated as a Yoruba Lukumi priest that opened my eyes more about who I am and how I show up in the world and why.
And how long have you been a priest?
How old am I now? 17 and a half years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Speak to us a little bit about that journey.
Oh boy.
If you don't mind. It's fascinating to me because so many people don't.
No. And I mean, unlike, I grew up, well, not grew up, but I was initiated in a Cuban house. Mm-hmm. And so my godmother is a Latina actually a Latina femme lesbian, badass woman, who is in her 60s. And so she grew up in a time and a place where you hid the religion. You hid all of your, regalia or your paraphernalia. You hid all that. You hid all, whether it's jewelry or you hid your orishas or what have you. You didn't show people. You didn't tell people because, as we know, during colonization and slavery, people who practiced the religion, whether it's Yoruba through Ifa, Yoruba through Lukumi, they were penalized, they were punished or beaten. And so they hid them, they subsumed them under the guise of Catholic saints. Now people were not worshiping Catholic saints, but as a way of hiding from the white slave owners. I hate this language, but the people who enslaved us, in order to stay alive, they were like, okay, well, we're gonna put this mask over our orishas, but we know who we're praying to. We know we ain't praying to Santa Barbara. We're praying to Shango. We're just doing what we need to do to survive. And so for me, as somebody who grew up Lutheran of all things, my parents would wake me up. My dad would actually wake me up every Sunday between the ages of, 7 and 12 and make me go to Sunday school. Now, notice what I said. I didn't say he would take me. He went with me. He would wake me up and say, okay, you got to go across the hill to go to Sunday school. And so by the time I was 11 or 12, and I was just doing this because I was like, okay, well, you tell me what to do, I just do it. I wasn't asking why. In my family, there was no asking why. There was no why. You just do what you're told. And so when it came time to be confirmed in the church, which in my church, it was age 12, I'd gone to Sunday school. And then, as you got older, you go to church and I sang the songs and I read the Bible. And so I still, at 50 and change, I still remember a lot of the stories of the Bible and many of the songs. But at age 12, all my friends were like, oh, we're going to be confirmed. And what that meant was you're becoming, quote, an adult in the church. And so I said to them, I'm not doing that. And they were like, what do you mean? You're not going to be an adult in the church? And I said, well, I don't believe Jesus is the Son of God. And they were like, but you won't be an adult in the church. In that moment, I said, well, but I don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God. I believe that we're all children of God. And they were horrified. And they were like, yeah, but I was like, no, I can't do that. And that was the last time I went to that church. My parents didn't question me. They were very, laissez-faire, hands off. Because also they trusted me. I was a good student. So they trusted, well, if Lord stopped going, she must have had a reason to stop going. There was no questioning. But also when I went to the church, it was this Gothic church. And Gothic churches, for those of us who've been to Gothic style churches, they're dark, they're cold, they're imposing. And I never felt like God was there. Now, granted, I wasn't thinking, is God here? But in retrospect, I realized I never felt like God was there. I just heard lots of, cool songs and some really dope stories, but I didn't feel as if God was there. It didn't feel like a faith-filled space. It felt like lots of rituals. And so I was a nature girl. I always felt deeply rooted and connected to nature. And so I met a woman that I started dating when I was about 23, 22, 23. And she was interested in the religion. She hadn't been initiated, but she was practicing it. And I poo-poo-pooed. I was like, what you mean you got some beans in a pot? What's that elephant statue? Oh, that's that's foolish. I was just so rude and ignorant. I mean, not ignorant, but ignorant and so disrespectful. So disrespectful because I didn't know. And, clearly it wasn't about the religion. It was about our relationship. Right. And so we broke up subsequently about a year later. And don't you know, that's when I began to research the religion. Because I was like, I need to know what this is. I need to understand. Because there were things about it that spoke to me, like just really basic things like God is everywhere. Literally everywhere. God manifested in nature. God loving you no matter who you are and what you do, no matter what you look like. And I was like, let me check out this voodoo. Let me check out this Santeria stuff. Let me check out this stuff. Let me read. And so I read and I read and I read and I read some more and I read some more and I read some more. And then I waited and I just kind of quietly prayed saying, send me a guru or send me somebody who can guide me. And so one day when I was, I don't know, in my probably late 20s, I was sitting in a car with a colleague of mine. I was working at Cal and Lourdes Medical Center up in New York. I was doing my doctoral internship there as a clinical social worker and providing psychotherapy and counseling for LGBTQ people in a health clinic for us. And we were sitting and we were talking. And at one point, we started talking about life journeys and paths. And this is, this really sweet Puerto Rican butch woman who I kind of had a crush on, I ain't gonna lie. And, we're chatting, having a heart to heart, and I started to cry. She's like, why are you crying? I said, I really wish I had like a guru or somebody to guide me. I just feel like I've been searching for so long. And she looked at me and she's like, I'm a santera, right? And I was like, I had no idea. And I started to cry even harder because I was like, oh my goodness. And she said, well, if you want, I can ask my girlfriend. I was like, you got a girlfriend? She's like, yeah, my girlfriend's a santera too. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would love that. She's like, yeah, she can give you a reading if you want. Let me ask her first. But I'll ask her and, see if she can give you a reading. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful. Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful. Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful. And soon thereafter, her girlfriend said, yeah, sure, come on. I went off to New Jersey and I got my reading, and she was just this really sweet, like a teddy bear of a woman. If you think about like a teddy bear dressed in like, really frilly feminine clothes, she just looked like that. That's not meant to be an insult. She just looked so sweet and so warm and so embracing.
Yes.
And I'm a sucker for that. You're warm. I want to know you. I want to be around. I want to be up under you. And so she gave me a reading and she's like, yep, it's clear. You're supposed to be doing this. You're supposed to be in this religion. And I was like, yay. And then I said, so will you be my godmother? And she said, well, we have to ask my Orisha. And I said, okay, so what we got to do? She said, well, you want to do that now? I said, yeah, I've been waiting. It's been years. I need to get the show on the road. So we asked her Orisha, which was Ochun, and Ochun said yes. And so, that was in my late 20s. And things moved along pretty quickly because it came out that I needed to be initiated as a priest. And which I was cool with because my thinking was, I want to be initiated so that I can help other people. Like that was really my thinking. It wasn't about, I want to be cool. I want to be down. I want to be part of this thing. It was really about, I believe that this religion, I believe that this connection to God and spirit will help me be even better at supporting my communities. It was that basic. My communities and my loved ones. And so it ended up that I was meant to be initiated for my health. And I was like, oh, word? Oh, okay. All right. And so I did what I had to do, saved my coins, and I got initiated in 2002 as a priest of Ogun. And Ogun's a blacksmith. Ogun is a warrior. Ogun is a fearless warrior. Ogun works 24/7. He's a workaholic. He does all the work for you so you don't have to work that hard. But it also came out that my second Orisha, the one that they say is at your feet, is Oya, who is the only female warrior who fights with all the male warriors. And she rules the marketplace and she rules transformation and change. She is the winds that come, that destroy and knock down things so that we can have new beginnings. Those who don't really understand her say, oh, she's a goddess of destruction. No, boo. It's destruction to create something new. So I come from this path of double warriors. So there's this thing about work and clearing the way for something new. And so one of my other life mantras is transformation through hard work. So when you asked, how do I show up in the world? Yes, I work as a psychotherapist and I work as a writer. But I come very clearly like, okay, my role is to transform stuff so that we can have a better life. We can have a better world. And so I'm just a tool.
One of the things that we've seen in the past few years has been the real wave of Black women from all parts of the world, but certainly in the United States, a Black woman embracing African traditional religions.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, that's scary because, we have this idea that, the Black community is monolithic and you go to the Black church.
Right.
And so that other stuff is scary stuff and you shouldn't be involved in that. And it's kind of sad because there's so much about religious spheres outside of the Black church that people don't know, and it scares them, even if it came from them.
Ache.
It scares them. Have you ever dealt with folks who would say, "Girl, I don't know if you should be messing with that stuff. That ain't Jesus saying that."
See, my mother, special lady that she was. See, in Staten Island, it's some people say predominantly white. I say historically white place. And so the church I was going to, it was not a Black church. It was a white Lutheran church. I was one of few Black people in the church. And since I wasn't going with my parents, I was going alone. There was nobody to say anything to me. And so this, again, with, the idea about the monolithic Black religious experience, I didn't have that experience. So I never had anybody say, "Oh, girl, you shouldn't be doing that. That's blank." No one said anything. If anything, my mother, when I told her I was getting initiated, her first question was, "How'd you hear about it?" She was just curious about, "How'd you hear about this?" And I said, "Remember so-and-so, I was dating X, Y, and Z." And she was like, "Oh, yeah, I remember her." And I said, "She introduced me to it." And she's like, "Oh, okay." That was it. My dad didn't ask any questions. If anything, I said, "Okay, so I'm doing this thing. I'm getting initiated as a priest. I'd like to know if you will come to my ceremony." And then my mom's second question was, "Well, what we got to do?" And I was like, "You don't have to do anything. Just show up." And so they did. They were there. My mother, my father, my sister, and her daughter, they were there for my initiation. They were there for the 2 or 3 day process. They were there to bear witness. And it didn't dawn on me that they should be there. My godmother was like, "You should have them there." I was like, "Well, why?" Because I wasn't close with my mother. She said, "Because they can give face for you." And what she meant was basically, they're your representatives. These are your people bearing witness to what you are doing. And then also there's a part where you ask them for your blessing. Now, granted, if I hadn't gotten their blessing, I would have done it anyway. But it's the principle of the matter. It's the idea that you ask your elders to give their okay to this life-changing event. So I never had that experience about Black folks saying anything. I never had the negative experience. But also, I am my mother's child. I'm going to do what I got to do. You can say whatever you want. You can come out of left field and I'm like, "Oh, that's cute." I'm still moving. I'm still doing what I need to do.
What is your work as a Yoruba priest? What does that involve?
So what it looks like for me, because I'm someone who takes God parenting very seriously, because my thing is, if I said to someone, "Yes, I'll be your godparent," that means I'm responsible for your physical but most importantly, your spiritual health until either one of us dies. And to me, that's a very heavy responsibility, because that means I'm supposed to guide you in spiritual ways, but also rituals. And I don't need to be all up in your business, but I need to make sure that you're growing. Not just, okay, you're initiated, bye, see ya. But also, are you developing? Are you growing? Are you growing in the ways that you're supposed to? Are you growing in the ways that you need to? Because the idea of being initiated, it's not, at least how I was taught, it's not just, because it's part of a cute clique. No, it's for your elevation and your benefit, and hence our elevation and our benefit. And so I do not have godchildren because I'm very clear. I'm like, wait, that's like being a parent until you die. I'm not doing that. So what I do is I use it in my work as a therapist. And on my website, which is how people usually connect with me. Sometimes after someone says, hey, can I talk with you? I'm interested in working with you. Every now and then, because most of my clients are Black cis women, some lesbian, some heterosexual, some queer identified, every now and then they'll ask, so how do you use being a spiritist, because I'm also a spiritist or a spirit medium, how do you use that and, being a priest in your work? And I said, well, that's a great question. What it looks like is, we're sitting having a session and seemingly out of nowhere, information about you comes to me. Information that I could not have possibly had. But spirit, whether it's God, aka Olodumare, whether it's ancestor spirits, yours or mine, whether it's Ogun or Yah, whether it's who knows what. Mm-hmm. I just get information. So what I do is I tell them, so let's say I'm sitting with a client, and I'll say, I don't know why, but I have this image of a bloopity bloop. Does this resonate with you? And they're like, oh my gosh, yes. That's blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but it just came to me. And it seemed like it's something that needs to be shared with you. And so I'm just a vessel. I'm just a tool. I'm just a medium. Mm-hmm. And so I use it in that way for the benefit of others. And I'm also very clear with people. When you're coming to me as a therapist, you're not coming to me with also like extra stuff. So I don't practice, my psychotherapy practice is not also my priesthood practice. Mm. However, I can't turn that stuff off. Mm-hmm. Just like I can't turn off being Black. Mm-hmm. Spirit always says something to me, both for me and for those that I'm working with and those that I'm encountering. So that's how it shows up. And I hope that's clear enough. Because I know for some people that might be a little vague or abstract.
Well, it's interesting, just as you talked about, you believe that we really have tools for resiliency. I believe that we really have the capacity for intuition.
Yes.
But so much blocks that stuff that we can't get to the place of clarity. Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
And I think that if we could get to that place of clarity, so much of us would be better. Mm-hmm. We'd be well. We'd be well people. Yes. But it's like we talked about all the things that are stacked on top of you, that you're trying to claw that off so that you can get clear, you can be free. And we talked before we started about Toni Morrison, and just how over the past few months I've been thinking about her life and her work since she's made her transition. And just this whole idea about when we gather this strength to center ourselves and to make it clear who we are and our importance in the world, that creates a shift for us.
Absolutely.
And there are things that can make that happen. I think writing does that. I think music does that. Painting and so as I think about just who you are in all those different dimensions as a writer, both in the academic world and the nonfiction world, as a Yoruba priest, as a psychotherapist, and, placing all of that in this beautiful place of centeredness and brilliance and beauty, and you're modest and humble and all of that stuff. But of claiming that. And that makes, I think, one who does that and knows all that she brings to the world, a very powerful entity. And then makes it possible for other people, because they look at your life and see what you've done, that there's something for them to do as well. Whether or not they talk with you or they're your client. It's just about how we move in the world and when we show up,
Mm-hmm.
how it can make things possible
Mm-hmm.
for the people.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't even know they're looking at us.
Gotcha.
So that's the beauty of, I think, just claiming our space,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and the beauty and the brilliance of it. We've talked about it a lot, and you bring so many things to the table. What are some things we may have missed, or I always tell that to guests. What have we not talked about that you think is important for our listeners to know about you, your work, about life, wellness?
We are worthy of thriving. We deserve more than just surviving. We deserve more than just surviving. And whatever that looks like, whatever thriving looks like for us as individuals, as communities, that's up to us. But if we know, if we hold on to, if we really believe that we are worthy of thriving, we are worthy of being light-filled, we are worthy of being joy-filled, we are worthy of having, and I don't necessarily mean just materially, but we are worthy of the quality of life that we want. I think that's important to remember. And that's something else that also pushes me, because I'm very clear that I'm put on this planet to challenge things, to shake up things so that we can have fairness and justice and equity, and thrive and be whole. But I also am aware that I deserve moments of light and joy. One thing that we didn't talk about that we talked about off mic was, as a therapist, that's also why I've purposely been trained in EMDR, which is shorthand for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So it's a fancy, sexy way, basically, of saying it's a type of therapy that can help get you freer, if not free. And what that looks like is it's a type of therapy that was designed for folks who have experienced trauma, trauma of all kinds. It was designed for folks who are struggling with or managing post-traumatic stress disorder and the symptoms of that. And so I purposely got trained in it because I had a young Black woman, butch lesbian, come to me and say that she was struggling with depression and anxiety for a long period of time. And I remember thinking, soon after we started working together, hot dang, okay, the old school traditional talk therapy is not going to work for this woman. I need to find a trauma-informed, a trauma-aware type of therapy that's going to work. And I quickly did a scan and I realized, oh, wait a minute. There's this type of therapy that I heard about in the mid to late 1990s. Oh, it's 2017. Yeah, it might be time to revisit that. And so I looked into it, and essentially it's a type of therapy that involves some physical movement, and it's designed to stimulate both the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain. And so the right hemisphere of the brain is largely, not totally, but largely responsible for or in charge of our emotional selves. And the left side of that brain is largely, or has parts of it that are largely connected to logic and reasoning and being rational. And whether you've experienced one type of trauma or multiple types of trauma, the brain kind of gets set and stuck in that groove, but particularly the right side, the parts related to emotionality, the parts related to anger and fear and the fear responses, the parts related to getting us ready to fight, fly or flee. Flee or freeze. The emotional, the rational parts get shut down. Because the body and the brain are basically like, oh, well, hold on, you had this traumatic event happen once. Okay. All right, we'll be essentially okay. But then something else happens, or depending on, let's say it's just one thing, but it's one very large thing. So let's say it's some sexual assault or being in a car accident or domestic terrorism based on race or sexuality or, oh my gosh, the combination of things. So basically moments where you feel as if your life and your personhood are under siege or, threatened. The brain says, okay, this thing happened once, we need to be ready. And so we get into warrior mode. But what that means is that we're not able to think rationally. We're not able to think logically, except as a warrior. It's really about how can I defend myself? And so that also impacts how we perceive other people, how we receive love. Can we receive love? And what does that even look like? How do we connect people or not connect people? Because connecting with someone might be something terrifying. And so with the EMDR, what it does is one of my clients calls it, I think she called it neurological hoodoo. And I was like, that's cute. I like that. And then another client was like, oh, that's like mental yoga. I'm like, go with that. I like that too. And so basically it kind of resets the brain to where it initially started. And one of the premises behind it is that just like when you get a cut, unless you're a hemophiliac, our body naturally heals. So there might be some blood, but the skin naturally recloses without any sutures or anything, and the body naturally heals itself. When it comes to trauma, the brain can do that too under the right conditions. And so I have found that it has been so useful for the Black women that I work with, because I teach them a variety of exercises that center themselves literally, get them grounded, get them back into their bodies. Because sometimes, depending on the type of trauma that we've experienced, being in our body is the last place we want to be. Being in our body is scary, right? And so with the EMDR, part of the technique is that therapists help clients, give them little tools, give them exercises that they can use on their own. So I teach a client, let's say a deep breathing exercise or a guided visualization exercise that they can then use on their own anywhere. I don't need to be around. And so once we do that, then there's some other activities that are basically designed to get the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere working together. And it's done without rehashing the trauma. Because for many of us, talking about trauma over and over again is re-traumatizing.
There are a lot of sisters, some I've interviewed, and some other folks who listen who do the type of work that requires them to carry weight for other people. They may be a therapist, they may be a minister, they may be a doctor, maybe a teacher. And at the end of the day, you come home and that's a lot of weight you can carry. I'm just curious, with all the work that you do, what do you do at the end of a long day? And what makes it possible for you to show up the next day as whole as you can be to do the work again?
So I'll start with question A. What do I do? I spiritually clean myself every day before I leave my office. So even if I'm like, I just want to go home and watch Greenleaf, I just want to go home and have some popcorn, I say, okay, that's cute, but you need to spiritually clean yourself before you leave this office, before you get on the train. And so I do that every day. In addition, every morning.
And what does that mean?
Oh, what does that mean is it mean I might take a piece of fruit or a piece of candy, and as I'm praying to ancestors, to Olodumare, aka God, to all my Orishas, rub it along my body to take the negative energy that has been left with me. So I ask that piece of fruit or birdseed or whatever it is to take that energy and hold it instead of me holding it. And then I throw it away. Don't take it home with me. But of course, because it's been a long day, there might be some residuals, right? Every morning I wake up. Before I get out of the bed, I am praying. Before I get out of my bed, I am praying. And then I stretch as well. And then I go for a run or I go to the gym. Because I need to be as physically fit and as emotionally fit as I can to do the work because I'm sitting. And I'm a very active therapist, meaning I am listening, I am present, I am laughing with you. I might even cry with you a little bit, And then when I get home, I pray again. I also have a travel journal that I keep with me and I write stuff, or I'll do crossword puzzles on the train ride home, or I'll read a book that has nothing to do with anything related to therapy. So might read a mystery novel. And depending on how many clients I've had, if it's been, let's say if I've seen more than 5 people a day, my wife and I are not talking for a good hour and a half after I get home, because we've already got this arrangement. It's like, no, Lourdes has been sitting for many hours. She doesn't want to hear anything about anything. She loves you very much, but she's not listening to you right now. If I see less than 5 people, we'll debrief our day. But what that means for me is that I'll say, "Ooh, child, it was a long day. Ooh, I had some EMDR sessions and it was a long day." And that's pretty much it. Like, I don't share what I do with her because it's, I keep confidentiality.
Right.
But I might say it was a hard day. But then also I write. And for me, my creative nonfiction, it's a really, that and exercising are wonderful balances to the energy that I'm receiving from people. Because with my creative nonfiction, whether it's the memoir, whether it's short stories that I'm writing, it's about creating. It's about making things new. It's about going deep and wide in my head, in the world, just going wherever spirit takes me through writing. And then to go to your second question, what helps me wake up the next day? My 2 life mantras, Meliora, which is always better, and believing that transformation happens through hard work. And that's what I'm here to do. I was put here to be a worker. And as much as I work, I make a point of playing too. I go hiking. And I do all the things that I mentioned. I go to museums. I get out and I make sure to remember to look for the chipmunks. I look for the birds. I listen to the sound of the birds in the morning. And if I can't hear them, I make a point of finding some sunlight. I always look for joy. I always look for beauty. I always look for life. So even though it may seem, like things are bleak, I always look for the light. Because the moment that I stop looking for the light, then I may as well just lay down and not wake up again. And it's not my time to do that yet.
Lourdes, thank you for being part of our Black lesbian herstory.
My pleasure. I hope it's useful.
One of my takeaways from this interview was the importance of being able to know where you are when you're at work, being at work, and when you're at home, being at home. And during these days when work and home are mixed in a mashup, it can be difficult to make those boundaries. What a gift to think about creating a ritual that will help us separate those spaces so that we can have more balance in a time when it seems like everything is up in the air, topsy-turvy. There are many other takeaways from this interview as well, and I hope you'll share those with me in your feedback and comments wherever you listen to the podcast. Be on the lookout for a future interview with Dr. Follins to talk about the memoir she is writing about her mother. As always, I so appreciate your keeping your ear to the ground with this podcast. Be safe. Have a sweet one.
Hey.